Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for the interest in what the Commission is doing on invasive alien species. We are currently developing a dedicated legislative instrument on invasive alien species. First of all, what do we mean by invasive alien species? So we call a species an alien when it has been transported across ecological barriers, across the sea, across mountains, or from one sea to the other. So a species that migrates by itself because of climate change, for instance, certain dragonflies are migrating from southern Europe towards the north because of climate change. These are not alien species, these are natural processes. Because we call a species alien when it really has been transported by humans across barriers where it would normally not be able to migrate. So that's for alien species. Why do we transport those species? Well, sometimes we transport them intentionally. We see a beautiful shrub on the other side of the world. Think, for instance, Japanese knotweed in Japan, a beautiful shrub with nice flowers. We bring it here to plant in our garden. It grows well, it's beautiful, but afterwards it starts spreading everywhere. But that's an example of an alien species which afterwards becomes invasive, which we introduce intentionally. But we also introduce a lot of species unintentionally. For instance, think of the ballast water transported across the globe. Or to take a plant species, think of ragweed, common ragweed, for instance, which we do not transport intentionally, but by transporting agricultural produce across the globe, we easily have a few seeds that are transported with the other commodities, and we bring it on in completely different places. So intentionally or unintentionally. So that's how alien species arrive in a completely different place, and we call them alien. It's not because they are alien, they are a problem, because we need alien species. We would not survive without alien species. But we have had some studies who told us that there are about 11,000 alien species in the nature in Europe, and we have seen that 10 to 15% of those alien species is causing some type of problems. And it's then that we call them invasive alien species, when they really cause serious problems. They cause problems for biodiversity, for the environment, but also for society and for the economy. They can have serious consequences. They are one of the major causes of biodiversity loss. So when you look to the biodiversity, it's decreasing. The main causes of the current loss of biodiversity or overexploitation, think about the seas where we are fishing everything, or habitat change, and also pollution. These are the major causes of the current state of biodiversity. But when we look to the future, there are two new major processes impacting biodiversity, and these are climate change and invasive alien species. And so contrary to the first three problems, where we are getting some control over the problem concerning pollution, overexploitation, for the invasive alien species and for climate change, we do not have control over the problem yet. When we look to the figures on damage we have, we see that there are data that tell us that invasive alien species have caused about 12 billion of damage and control costs per year in the EU. So that's a figure for the last 20 years, about 12 billion euro per year. All types of costs, economic and health costs, many types of costs. And the problem is that this damage is expected to increase because the problem is not yet under control. And contrary to certain other major important countries in the world, like the United States or Canada, who have policies on invasive alien species, there is currently no dedicated EU instrument. So that is where we are working on. Yeah. And I give you some examples. The first one is the American bullfrog. It has been introduced for food, but it escaped, and it's spreading very easily, and where it arrives, it causes a lot of damage to biodiversity, because it eats everything in the pond. It eats all the plants, all the life, it eats the native frogs, it eats everything. They eat each other even, they are very, very hungry species. So the American bullfrog, a problem for biodiversity. The next one, you might know, is the black cherry. Imported because it's growing very easily on sandy soils, and so it's difficult to do forestry on poor sandy soils. With this species, it grows very well, but it grows extremely well. And where you have the species, it multiplies, it grows everywhere, it causes a lot of shade, and nothing else can germinate. So you cannot, it's very difficult to have other trees to grow into a forest that's completely dominated by black cherry. So important for forestry, but no causing problems for forestry. The next one, you will probably also know, it's one that's here already since long, it's the muskrat. Was introduced for its fur. It has a nice fur, but also this one, it escaped from the places of cultivation, and you probably know the problems it causes. It's undermining dikes. It's really causing a serious problem for infrastructure and for safety. So the muskrat. Then the last one is the tiger mosquito. That's a species introduced unintentionally. No one is going to bring a tiger mosquito because he likes it, because no one likes this species, because it's carrying a lot of diseases like dengue fever, Japanese encephalitis, a lot of tropical diseases. And it's carried unintentionally, often in tires. When tires are transported across the globe, there's often a little bit of humidity left, and there's often a few eggs of this mosquito, and so like that it's transported to very different places. And it's mainly in southern Europe it has caused outbreaks of tropical diseases. So these are some examples. Then here are some figures about the trends. The first figure is a trend, in fact it's invasive alien plant species in Europe, and you see a growing trend. So the figure shows the new alien species recorded per year during this whole period. So you see it is really going up, because of course we are traveling, we are having more and more trade, and so constantly we are introducing more and more alien species into the EU. So the one figure is for all the species together, so number of species. The second figure is about damage per species, and that's also the problem. So there are two growing curves, one on top of the other. So the first curve says more and more alien species enter, and so more and more invasive alien species also among those alien species. And every invasive alien species, when it just entered, it causes just a little bit of damage, but it starts spreading, and the more it spreads, the more damage it causes. This is a figure of the zebra mussel in the Ebro Delta in Spain, causing. You see, it was just introduced they saw it for the first time in 2001, and so you see the curve going up very quickly, because the zebra mussel, it came in through ballast water or through hull fouling on ships, but it's really blocking pipes. It's also blocking the pipes of electricity plants, for instance, causing blocks of electricity, and like that, causing a lot of damage to the economy. So we see this when you add many of those curves on top of this one, you get really an exponentially growing curve. So that is why we have to act very quickly on invasive alien species. Now, so let's first look to the international contact, because we are absolutely not the first one to act on invasive alien species. First there is CBD, the Biodiversity Convention. There was a conference of party of the Biodiversity Convention 2 years ago in Nagoya in Japan, and they developed a strategic plan on biodiversity, in which one target is specifically on invasive alien species. So all the parties of the convention agrees that they will take measure to address at least the most risky, the priority species, and their pathways. That's for biodiversity. Then you have the plant and animal health regimes. So plant health regime, I think you know this much better than me even. You know IPPC and EPO, they are mainly working on pests and diseases of plants and plant products. But EPO is also working on invasive alien plants, and then also animal health. So in fact, pests and diseases of animals and plants, they are the first type of invasive alien species. And so these policies are already well developed, and now we are going to close the gap for the species that are not covered by animal and plant health. Then number 3 is the Ballast Water Convention. It's not yet into force, and it's tackling the enormous number of species that is transported across the globe in the ballast water of ships. Then at the pan-European level, there is the Bern Convention that has done some work on invasive alien species, but no legal measures, more voluntary codes of conduct, and they have been discussing a lot, and it has helped a lot. It has helped the member states a lot to deal with invasive alien species. And then these are international organizations. When we look to other countries, we see some major trading partners of the EU, like the United States and Canada and Australia and New Zealand. They have a very strong policies on invasive alien species, which we do not have. Yeah. Yeah. This figure, I put it there because it's a nice one that shows the impact of such a policy on species, on alien species. And these lower curves are interesting. This is the number of alien insects in Europe, the number of new alien insects coming in Europe. And these are two curves on Canada and on Northern America. So here they have put policies into place, and the number of new species coming in is decreasing, while in Europe it keeps increasing. So it shows the impact a good policy can have on the number of species coming in, alien species coming in. Yeah. Then we look to the EU context. So first of all, we have plant and animal health regimes that are well established. For the moment, they are undergoing revision. They are also considering where they can include certain components of biodiversity into the policies. So we are looking to what they are doing. The more they include in their policies, the better for us, because they are well established. We are starting with something completely new, and what we will address is the species that are not included under those regimes. We will never address a plant disease, because this is plant health. Only the species that are not tackled by the plant health regime, and there are many left. So these are the two important ones. Then we have the wildlife trade regulation that regulates the international trade of endangered species. They have added a few invasive alien species on their lists, so that they can block trade. But of course that's only half a measure, because you can put it on a list, but if it comes in, then there's nothing into place under this legislation. But it's addressing a few problems on invasive alien species. But there, rather, when we have a new system into place, probably we will just remove the invasive alien species from the wildlife trade regulation, just to let the different legislations have their specific scope. Then another specific one is the aquaculture regulation that is legislating the release of alien species for aquaculture. This is already into place, and it's a bit a pilot, like a bit a pilot project for us, because it's working in a way. We are copying a lot of the mechanisms under this legislation. So, so this will remain into place, and it's rather a pilot one. And then the last three are the nature directives, marine framework strategy directive, and water framework directive. They are trying to achieve a good ecological status of conservation, for instance. And in order to achieve their targets, it's very important to address invasive alien species. So for those three pieces of legislation, it's important to do something here. So this is what's already into place, and this is the gap we want to close with this piece of legislation. Yeah. So in the EU context, last year we had our biodiversity strategy, just like the global biodiversity strategy, we have a European one, including a target on invasive alien species, which is more or less the same like the global one. And this target says that we want to identify and prioritize the invasive alien species and their pathways. So we want to prioritize, we want to select the most risky species that really cause problems. We will absolutely not address all alien species, no, only based on risk assessment, we will prioritize the species on where we want to act. Then those priority species we want by 2020, that's a mistake, it's not 2012 but 2020, we want them to be controlled or, if possible, eradicated. And then also we want to have a look to the pathways. Remember, all these species unintentionally introduced, that's also an important issue to be tackled. So this is the EU target on invasive alien species. There are two actions to support that target into the biodiversity strategy. The first action is to integrate biodiversity concerns as much as possible into the plant and animal health regimes, and then the next action, action 16, is to establish an own dedicated legislative instrument to tackle all the problems that are not yet addressed by the existing legislation. Yeah. Then when we look to the member states, because many member states, in fact most member states have done at least something somewhere on invasive alien species. We have an overview here with all the member states and different measures that can be taken. What we see is that the picture is very scattered. So some member states are doing one thing, another member state is doing something else. And even when we have a much longer list where we look per species, then you see one country acts on one species, its neighboring country acts on another species. For instance, Wallonia has an eradication plan for the giant hogweed, but France doesn't have this. So if Wallonia spends a lot of money completely eradicating the species, but the rivers are coming into Wallonia from France, and France is not doing this well, it will constantly be reinvaded. And so this picture, this scattered picture, is causing a lot of this type of problems. One country putting a lot of effort in one species where this country is suffering most problems, but its neighboring country is looking to another species. And so that's why it's important for the EU to act, to have a common, consistent ground. It will make the efforts much more efficient. So it's very scattered, the picture. When we look to what they are doing, they are working on control rather than prevention. When you look to plant and animal health, they are very much working on prevention. It's much more effective to avoid a harmful species to come in than to let it come in and wait, and when it causes problems, then to start acting, because often it's really too late. Think of the Japanese knotweed. It's hopeless to remove this because it always grows over and over, and it grows everywhere. So it's better to act much more preventive. So these are two elements which make it important to act at the EU level, to have a more consistent, efficient approach, and to act more preventively, to bring the measures more in line with what is happening on the plant and animal health regime. Yeah. And so we are now looking at what we are going to do at the EU level, and for this we have this problem tree. So with the driving force on top and the final result at the bottom. So what is the reason for the invasive alien species? This is trade in species for the intentional introduction, but this is also many other types of trade and also travel, transport, all the movements we are making. So the species trade is leading to intentional introductions into Europe, and then the other trade and transport is leading to unintentional introductions. When we look, it's only a quarter of the species that is introduced unintentionally. 3/4 of this invasive alien species is introduced unintentionally. So to address the intentional introduction, that's the easiest. You can do risk assessments, you can make lists and say, okay, those and those and those species, they do not come in, we ban trade. If you have enough evidence to prove that it's never necessary, you can do this. But that's for dealing with this part of the problem, the intentional introductions. But then there are the unintentional introductions, which are much more difficult to tackle. Then when they are introduced, at a certain moment they come into the environment, so the species that are introduced intentionally, some are introduced intentionally into Europe to be released intentionally, for instance certain trees to be planted in the forest, so they're really intentionally released into the environment. Some are really imported, but not to be released into the environment, to be kept in contained holding. Think of the muskrat, it was not meant to be released into the environment, but it escaped. So intentional introduction plus unintentional escape. And then there are the unintentional introductions. So when we work on the prevention, we work on this whole section. We can do this as well as possible, but we will never be able to completely avoid new species to come in. So then the next step is, when a species come in, it starts growing, it starts reproducing and spreading all over. So that's the next step in the problem tree. What should we do here? That is early warning and rapid response. And so that is what you are going to discuss today. That is extremely important for us. Because if we are able to act quickly and quickly eradicate a new invasive species that come in, then we can solve the problem quite quickly. If we cannot manage this, then we really get into all those damage, environmental, economic, and social damage. So that is the problem tree. Yeah. So we have translated this in a solution tree. So prevent intentional introduction, risk-based analysis of which species should really be addressed. Intentional, unintentional, that's a much more difficult one, where we will cooperate with the member states because we are still lacking a lot of knowledge on how to tackle on what are the major pathways. So there's the Ballast Water Convention, for instance, that is tackling one pathway, but there are still many pathways on which we do not have sufficient information and we do not know the right measures here. So that's a very difficult one. So that's all prevention. If we fail, early warning and rapid response. So I think you will be discussing this today. And so, because for early warning, rapid response, we need surveillance. And it's clear neither EU nor the member states they can all do efforts to organize surveillance, but they can never do it alone because a species can just turn up anywhere and it can be any type of species. So we will have to cooperate with many stakeholders, with the public. We will have to set up a whole cooperation system to organize such an early warning. So, and I think that is the major point where you can get in, because I think you have a lot to offer there. And so if this early warning works, then we can rapidly respond and eradicate the problem. If it doesn't work, then it will be a matter of managing the problem to keep the damage under control as well as possible. But sometimes we even don't know the measures. For instance, there's a harlequin ladybird that is in many places in Belgium. It's just everywhere, but we have no clue what we can do. And so eliminate the problem if possible, minimize or mitigate. And that is mainly what is happening for the moment. And this we want to shift more to early warning, rapid response, and to prevention. That's what we want to do, to shift upward. So I think that's the last slide. I know there's a timeline. So in 2008 there has been a Commission communication. Then we received feedback from the other European institutions. Then from 2010 we started working very intensively on the topic. We had several stakeholder consultations, member state public consultations, we had many consultations, working groups and also inter-service consultations within the Commission. And so now we are working towards a proposal by the end of 2012, if everything works well, it might also be the beginning of 2013. By then the Commission would launch a proposal. Then of course it will go to the next phase with the Parliament and the Council, discussing the proposal, and then we hope soon after that the legislation can be into place. So that's what we are doing. I have a last slide, and this is just our website, so all the information we have, you can find everything on the website. You can also, all the documents that have been made by stakeholders and working groups, we put everything on the website so you can see how we have been informed. And this is the mail address. I think that's the easiest address. If you want us to send us certain things or comments or contribution, you are very welcome to send something to this mail address. So that's it. I don't know whether there are any questions.
First of all, thank you. If I may ask to kick off a short debate, the form of the proposal on your last but one slide, what will it be? Will it be a green paper?
It will be a legislative instrument, but it has not been decided yet whether it will be a directive or a regulation, but we are working really towards a legislative instrument.
That will tackle what issues? I mean, sort of prevention system?
Yeah. Well, all the things that were on this problem and solution tree,
This one.
yeah, this one, we will address all those issues. Of course, for certain ones, it will be easier to address than like this one. It will be more vague. So, but these are the objectives of our legislative proposal. So you see 5 operational objectives. That's what we want to tackle. But for one, we will be more detailed than for the other, depending on what is possible.
And Mr. Dumortier, who will be the target of this legislation? Will that be the public health authorities, the environmental authorities in the member states, or who will be the target?
I think all of them, because it's very important. We have been communicating a lot with the member states, and often, because we are DG Environment, we automatically communicate with the environmental services. But it's clear it's also very important for the plant health, for instance. So yeah, we will still, but we are in communication also with the plant health.
2 more questions there. One in the back, Henry Mott, and afterwards.
You're asking for a sort of an eyes and ears approach for invasive. Is there a list of high-risk invasive species that you are targeting that aren't yet in Europe?
Yeah.
And if so, what is that?
Yeah, no, we have no official list yet. There have been certain exercises. There has been a big project, DAISY, that identified the 100 worst species. But they have also been identified for communication purposes, so we do not think this is the suited list for a legal instrument. There have been also exercising, developing indicators, making lists of invasive alien species, by streamlining European biodiversity indicators. They have also developed lists. So there are many existing lists, but they inspire us, but these are not our lists. Because in the legislative instrument, there will be a list, but it will be a very dynamic list, because new species will threaten the EU, we will have to add them. For certain species it will turn out to be hopeless, and then there's no need to if the species is really everywhere and you cannot do anything, there's no need to have it in the list. It's better to have a shorter list with species where really you can make a difference. So there will be a system of decision making, and it has not been decided how it will work yet. These are things we are researching now. But it will be a dynamic list, and I think the proposal, once it's launched, we will work on a first list to launch, but it will not be a static list into the. I think it's the same with plant health. In the new plant health legislation, they will also have something more dynamic. But it's all under developing, of course.
Yes. Here. Yeah, you mentioned earlier that there are some policies already implemented in North America, Canada, US. And you also show that obviously they get good results, efficient. If you look into their solutions, and how do you anticipate the European solution versus the North American? Will there be a big difference, or is it something similar? Can you comment that?
Yeah, so we are looking to their systems because we can learn a lot of it. I think we will be rather similar to the US and Canada. They have much more open systems where they act more. First they want a risk assessment, and then they will put the restrictions. Australia and New Zealand, they work the other way around. Also Japan is quite restrictive. We cannot do this in Europe because we have so much trade, there's so much going in and out. We cannot do this. They can't do this. But I think we will be closer, and it's important to have systems which are a bit similar for the public to understand it, to be able to work with it. So I think we are really looking to them. We are cooperating to develop something similar, and also to exchange information, because if they have problems with certain species, if the US has problems with certain species, then that is a high-risk species for us to come in, so we will have to cooperate also. Yeah.
More questions? Yes,
Yes.
Cyprus?
We're speaking about alien species by third countries. What's happening within Europe countries due to climate changes? An example, we have the international law for ISPN 15 for wood damage insects. Like today, in my country is 35 degrees. Here is about 20, 22. So we have big problems within the European countries.
Yeah.
What's going to happen with that?
Yeah, we have been discussing this very much because indeed there are also invasive alien species that cause problems in one member state and are liked in another state, or even are native in one member state and causing problems in another member state. So when we develop a list, we will put species into the list which we really think it's a problem at the EU level. Therefore, it should not be a problem in all the countries, but it's important enough to become a problem at the EU level. Then the species will end up in the list. Once they are in the list, then all the member states will be obliged. So if we recognize that it is a problem at the EU level, and certain member states are suffering with that problem, others are not having problems, then that country will be obliged to take measures to avoid at least the species to spread, the listed species, so avoid the listed species to spread into other member states. So really, if it's really a risk, then we have also to avoid the species. Then if a species gets on the list, it will not only be banned for trade, but then there will be the early warning rapid response system and also the management obligation. And so the management obligation is to keep the damage under control and also to avoid the species further spreading inside the EU.
More questions? In that case, no.
Okay, thank you for the questions.
It's up to us. I say once more a big thank you. I think this it was an interesting speech, and I'm so delighted that you accepted to come and talk here. Because for once, ladies and gentlemen, I think this is a legislative project that for the pest management services business could be an opportunity more than a problem.